Last week we went through, is there a creator? We didn't quite get to the end of it. So the idea here this week is to have Q&A on what we did, and then I'll complete a little bit before we move on to another little subject. As you know, this series, January and February, is designed to give you little bits of access to Vedanta, introduction to Vedanta. And the idea is that if there is sufficient interest, then when we reconvene in April, after a break in March, then we might consider doing a significant text and go through that in some way. So this is just little snippets. It's not meant to bring you fully up to speed, but give you an idea of some of the facets that Vedanta has within it and what it is that the Upanishads try and convey in a slightly different language. So we did basically three situations that Vedanta talks about. All are incredulous and all are contrary to our expectations and our experience. So in the first week we did an introduction, but the first of these ideas is that you are not the limited mortal self, but you are complete and immortal. This simply is not our experience, because every day we wake up with our aches and pains, and we look at the mirror and we've aged apparently since even yesterday. So we look at this thing and we know that we're of limited intelligence. There are people that are brighter than us, people that are not, and therefore we don't feel very complete. And Vedanta says you are complete. The second one, what's the second one that Vedanta says? That's contrary to our experience. It says that the world as you see it, all right, is tangible, is transactional, is useful, but it's just not real. All right. And reality in Vedanta is defined as something that exists in all three periods of time. This is contrary to your experience because you've grown up with the world as being solid, real. It feels as real as anything that you have around you. And for Vedanta to turn around and say it's actually not real is contrary to your experience. So this too needs investigation. And then the final aspect that we started on last week is that this is a world of objects. It appears to be a world of objects. One of those objects is me. I'm a unique object in this world. But if this is a world of objects, is there a provider of this world of objects? If you believe in a separate world of objects, you have to come to the idea, is there a God? Is there a giver? And that's what we tried to talk about last week. Any questions from that?
Why does there have to be a giver? Why can't it just be?
Right. First of all, Vedanta does not believe in anything just is. For anything that is, there has to be a cause. All right. Things cannot just be. It is always a cause and effect relationship. And the fact that something is means that it is caused by something else for it to be. So this is the logic that we have in our own experience. We just don't have ta-da, something just appearing in front of us. There's always a cause for something that appears in front of us. So that is the reason that Vedanta says that there must be a cause. You can argue that cause is various things, like nature produces plants and things like this. There's natural laws in the world by which we are governed. It's because of gravity that we get planted to the ground and that sort of thing. But then Vedanta would say that's absolutely true, but where do the laws come from? The laws are effects. Nature's laws are effects. What is the cause of that? So it starts to ask that question. 2. Any other questions? when we studied it, the one thing that came out was the fact that if there is, everything in the world appears to be given, and we went through a long list. I mean, we aren't part of any of this creation process. The fact that we're breathing now, we didn't create the oxygen. The fact that we breathe and we have 2 lungs and 1 heart, we did nothing for it. Right? The fact that each of our cells in our body is currently working in their own way, we don't do anything for that. The fact that we're born to particular parents or in a particular environment, that the world looks like this, that there are so many million species of plants and thousands of species of animals, is something that is given. It is not provided by us. We appear to come, enjoy all of these artifacts, and then go away again. All right. So the question arises that if all of this is given, is there a giver? Exactly right. Do come in. Hello, this is the Vedanta class? Yeah, excellent. Do come in. And position your seat so that you can see me and I can see you. That way I know whether you're sleeping or... And if you do sleep, that's so fine. Just don't snore loudly because you wake up the person beside you. Okay. So if all of this is given, is there a giver? So that was the first question that was asked, and it's not useful when you ask somebody, and the pragmatic would say, you talk about this giver, but where is God? Right? Normally the term that we use for this giver would be somebody who's all present, all knowledgeable, all right, and everywhere. Right? That is typically the definition of God. All knowledgeable, certainly, because everything that is given appears to be very complex, from a blade of grass to the construction of our eye. Everything is complex. Anybody who provides all of this must be in total knowledge of everything that is required to produce those items. All right. Omnipresent, because the world appears to be absolutely everywhere. So they must have gone to every corner of our world in order to produce the items that were given. All right. And it's certainly all-powerful because we know how much it takes, how much energy it takes, or how much power it takes to do one small item. Imagine doing the entire world, the universe, which is billions of size larger than we can see. So all-powerful, that is the definition. And the pragmatic would say, if there is such a giver, where is he? Do you recall that from last week? Yeah. And the question, where is he, is the incorrect question. Why is it, where is God? Why is that an incorrect question?
Because it's infinite. We already said that he will be present everywhere. So
that's right.
We asked that question in the first place.
That's right. So if God is everywhere, I mean, the pragmatic would say, where is he? Come on, show me, because I can't see him. You say that he's everywhere, but I can't see him. And it's the moment that you say, where is someone, you've already made up in your mind what they look like, what their properties are. If we said today, where's Shonali? All right, you know that Shonali is not here in this room because you know what Shonali looks like. All right, you know the absence of Shonali. As a result, asking the question, where is God, is that you already have a belief system of God in your mind. And that belief system of God does not comply with your current reality. That's why you ask the question. All right. So remember, people who don't believe in God is also a belief system to the people who believe in God. It's the same thing. Neither of this is provable. So, where is God is the wrong question. What is God may be a better question. And the answer to this question is different for different types of people. If you ask indigenous tribes, what is God? They'll just smile at you. They'll point to the earth and the sky and all the plants and the animals and their natural environment, and they say, there is God. God is everywhere. All right. But, we're much brighter than that. We've traveled the world, all the globes. We've met everybody there is to meet, and we know that there isn't a single person that we've met who's all-powerful. All right. Somebody I've met really, really bright, but he doesn't know Chinese, so he can't be God. All right. So we haven't met anybody that fulfills all of this criteria, and therefore we begin to doubt that there is God. The moment you say, where is God or who is God, you also separate God from you. And this is the fundamental mistake of all dualistic religions, is the moment that you consider yourself to be separate from God, you are the poor little sinner, the mortal, the insignificant, and God is this almighty and large. All right. The moment you separate yourself from God, you put yourself in a finite space. And the moment that you put yourself in a finite space, you make God finite. This has to be understood. This infinite God of infinite power, infinite presence, if God is supposed to be everything that there is, and you say, there's everything that there is, and then there's me, all right? Then the everything that there is no longer the everything there is. The everything there is everything there is minus you, and therefore it is finite. It is no longer infinite, all right? So the moment you consider yourself to be separate from the entirety of it all, you reduce the power of God from infinity to a finite force. You're just talking about another individual that just happens to know more and is stronger than you are. All right. So it doesn't match with the definition of God. So if you are part of that infinity, then God, the idea of God, has got to be the same as you. The underlying reality that, if you call that God, then that underlying reality must be your underlying reality. Only then can there be an infinite force, an infinite power that Vedanta calls Brahman. All right. The second aspect that came out, this is only, remember that the cause and effect that we discussed in the creation of the world, we talked about that there is an intelligent cause that produces the effect. There's also a material cause that produces the effect. And the example we gave was that of a
clay pot.
Clay pot. So if you have a clay pot is the effect, the intelligent cause is the potter. And the material cause is the clay. All right. So you need both things in order for there to be a pot. The nice thing about the things that we said about the clay is that the clay is the underlying reality. It is non-dependent on the pot. Do you remember these things? The pot is dependent on the clay. How do we know? Because you can have clay on its own without a pot. You cannot have the pot without the clay. All right. We also said that the two are not two substantial things. You know when something is substantial when you can separate it from another substantial thing. We cannot separate the pot from the clay. I cannot keep the pot while you keep the clay. All right. Therefore, we considered that the effect, the pot, was just a name and form of clay. And therefore, the third thing that comes out of it is the cause permeates all of the effect. So all of the pot, the clay goes all over the pot. It is the pot. It is the material cause of the pot.
When you talk about the person, is it the eye is the pot, and Brahman is the cause of the pot.
That's right. Yes. So it's is a manifestation of the one underlying reality that produces all of these other apparently separate things in the world. All right? But it's a one-way function. All right? The pot can become, the clay can become the pot, but the pot is not the clay. All right? So you can't, as all us pots, crackpots, and other pots that are sitting here, we can't say, all right, we are God. All right? Or we can say, God is also us. Or rather, Brahman is also us. All right? Because we're manifestations of that. So, the cause permeates throughout all of the effects. So when we come to the idea of the giver appears to be all intelligent. So we have the intelligent cause, the intelligence by which everything in the world can be created, including all the laws of nature, physics and chemistry and so forth. All right? But we also have to consider the material, because the world appears to be made out of material. So you can say, if God created the world, where did he get the material? All right. And the moment that you say, well, he just got it, we say, well, Vedanta doesn't believe in just is. And therefore the material, you can say, what is the space? What is the difference between the material and the maker? Is there a gap? Normally we have gaps as spaces. So then you'd have to say, who created the space? I mean, this is as bad as saying God is in heaven, because you'll have to say, who created heaven? So if you have somebody who makes something, there's Santa Claus, and he makes all of these presents, all right? There's a space between Santa Claus and the material with which he's making the presents, all right? The moment you've separated the material from the maker, you have made the maker finite. Because the material must occupy its own space, right? And the problem then arises, we do not have this infinite God anymore. The only conclusion that one comes to is that the material is the same as the maker. The intelligent cause and the material cause is one and the same thing. All right. So that's why we have this concept. We say that something makes something else when we say that something is being created. And the other thing, we have to say something becomes something else when it is the material. So because you got this both becomes and created, you cannot use the word creation in Vedanta. We have to have a word, and that word is Srishti, which the best translation for it, it cannot be translated fully. It's a mixture of those two. It is that which is intelligently put together. Because you now have both material and you have the intelligence putting it together, one and the same thing. In an earlier talk, Vedanta gives an example of what one and the same thing might be, and that was what? A spider. The spider creates his web. It produces both the material to produce the web and the intelligence by which the web is created. So they give that as an example. Hi, do come in. Welcome. So, the two things that we said was that, therefore, this Brahman, in order to match our reality, our experience, has to be both the creator and the material from which it is made. So we say that this Srishti, right, there can be only one Brahman, and that Brahman must be the underlying reality of all. Right. this becomes very difficult to believe. All right. And therefore Vedanta says this is not a belief system. This is a knowledge system. All right. Belief system is preached and knowledge system is taught. This is not something I tell you and you leave the room and you say, yeah, I believe Ram, well, maybe until I get another idea that's better. This is not a belief system. This is a knowledge system. So where's an example that we could follow where we can understand this one entity, if you like, that is infinite, that creates an entire world, including all the laws? And Vedanta says, look at your own experience. You say, well, I was looking at my experience. No, look at your experience when you're fast asleep. All right. In deep sleep, you're not dreaming. You're in deep sleep. All right. What exists for you? You say, nothing. In deep sleep, I can remember absolutely nothing. All right. Do you exist? Do you exist in deep sleep? And it has to be yes, otherwise there'll be nobody to wake up, all right? So I clearly exist in deep sleep, so because I come out of it and I think, oh, I had a really good sleep, I don't recall anything, all right? But I had a really good sleep. So you were there, the consciousness, the awareness was there, but it's as if you were in a dark closet with your eyes wide open. You could see, but there was nothing to see. There was nothing to be seen. All right? So in deep sleep, your awareness is fully there, but there's nothing to be aware of. Then you come halfway between a deep sleep and waking state, and you come to the dream state. Right? And in the dream state, your body is relaxed, right? It's largely not functioning, but your mind is fully on. So your subtle body is fully operational. And then you have a dream, all right? And in that dream, you place objects. By the way, you can only dream about things that you know. You cannot dream about things that you don't know, because the material cause of the dream is who? Who is the material cause of the dream? You. It's your mind, it's your memory, it's your thought patterns, it's whatever is going through your mind. You are the entire cause of the dream. Nobody else butts in there and produces their input. It is entirely your input, right? It is all you. You are the cause of the entire dream, and you place people within the dream, all right? And then you say, oh, let's have a pretty scene. I'll put some mountains over there. And I'll put the sun up in the sky, and I'll put a river flowing below, green grass. Lovely, lovely scene that you paint. And in that one moment, you've created time and you've created space. The moment those mountains are away from you, you've created space. And the moment you've created space, you've created time, because it takes time to go between you and the mountain. All right. And all of this material comes from you, and you put it together, including the natural laws required for those things to function. All right? The river is flowing. The sun is up in the sky. You put gravity, you put electromagnetism, you put everything together, all right? And you are the cause of that entire thing. The cause, the material, and you are the intelligence to say, that's a mountain, that's me, that's a river. All right. There you are in your dream. And is the dream to you believable? Yeah. Entirely. Your world in your dream is entirely believable. In fact, it could be slightly illogical, i.e., you know about people, you know about birds have wings, but you know both of these things, so you can put them together. You can suddenly have people flying around, all right? Things, you actually can create objects that is not possible to create in the waking state. But you are that creator. So suddenly, here you are, you create an entire believable world, all right? consisting of objects that are thinking for themselves, if they're sentient or not, right? You've got time and space, and you've got gravity, you've got a storyline, and it's all happening, and the only person who is this Srishti maker is you. Entirely believable. And then you wake up, and you have this world of objects. You see all of these things as separate objects. You are within it. There's a storyline. There's a time and space. All right? And now you suddenly cannot believe that there can be a single maker of both the intelligent cause and the material cause. It's illogical. All right? I do it every night. If I can do it every night at my micro level, why can't it be done? Brahman is pretty big. In fact, Brahman is all there is all big. Why can't Brahman do it at the macro level? All right? You have to ask yourself, because it's always a question of the micro and the macro. The micro is myself, the individual, and the macro is the universe. Right? What can exist within the individual? Why can it not exist in the universe? So Vedanta says that there is a giver. All right. This giver is both the intelligent cause and the material cause. But this giver is all there is. Just as we said right on the first talk, we said that there is no concept of I being a separate I. That we are not a mind-body with an Atma inside. We're Atma with a mind-body inside it. There is only one Atma, the micro and the macro. Brahman, from the perspective of the individual, is called Atma, and Brahman, from the perspective of the universe, is called Brahman. Atma equals Brahman. It's just a question of how you wish to relate to it. All right. So, this practical experience of the dream state says that it's entirely feasible and is believable. All right. So, we are just in Brahman's dream. All right. The problem with that is that Brahman as a single unity, infinite, that's all there is. When something is infinite and all there is no edge to infinity. All right. If there's no edge to infinity, there's no state change in infinity. Because you're in Brahman, and you're going along. There is no end of being not Brahman. There's no change of state. If there's no change of state, there cannot be any changes possible. Without a change, you cannot have creation. Because to create something, you must go from the state of it not being created to it being created. There has to be a changeover. So although the underlying reality of everything is Brahman, in order to put that into the context of our experience, we have to bring in this idea of Ishvara. That's why Ishvara is the nearest translation to God that Vedanta has. It is the giver. And he said, and if you want to write it in this way, you can say Ishvara is Brahman with the power of creation. And this power of creation, this powerful force, is called Maya. And we went down this little rabbit hole as well last week a little bit, right? Maya is something that will come up again and again in far greater detail later on. Just think of it as a catalyst, that it is required in order for us to be able to explain that the world exists. But in reality, it does not participate in the transaction. And we gave this little story, remember, of the 17 elephants Who can remember the 17 elephant story? You can? Would you like?
Last time I heard it, it was camels, actually.
Oh, right, okay. So we gave the little story of the 17 elephants, which simply, very quickly, because there's a number in the room that weren't here. So a king decided to retire and go off to the forest and leave his entire kingdom to his 3 sons. And this kingdom consisted of 17, he had a herd of 17 elephants. And he said to the 3 sons, to the first son, I leave half my elephants. And to the second son, I leave a third of my herd. And to my third son, I leave a ninth. And with that, he duly departed to the forest, leaving the 3 sons scratching their heads and crying because they thought they would just have to saw an elephant into pieces, because there's no way you could have half of 17. You'll end up with 8.5 elephants, all right, let alone a third and a ninth. And then the chief minister found them crying and said, what's the problem? When they explained it, he said, meet me here tomorrow morning at this time and I will solve your problem. And they were very pleased. They came back the following day and they met the chief minister, who has brought along his own single elephant, which he said, I now donate this to the herd. The herd is now 18 elephants. So the first son, who's very good at mathematics, immediately says, half of 18 is 9 elephants, it's a whole elephant, I can actually take 9 away, and he takes his 9 elephants away. The second son says, a third of 18 is 6 elephants. I'll take my 6 elephants, and he too departs. So 9 plus 6, 15 elephants have now gone, leaving 3 behind. And the third son says, a ninth of 18 is 2 elephants. So he takes his 2 elephants away. And the chief minister takes his final elephant back home with him. That 18th elephant is Maya, all right, required in order to complete the equation, all right, but does not participate in any way. Because Brahman is all there is Ishvara. If you give a name to this creator, both the intelligent and the material cause, then you have to give this Maya, this force, this power with which to manipulate all that is into this world of separate objects. Right? That was basically last week. Does it all come flooding back to those who are here? Okay. So if that is, if we can conclude on that, I thought we might, something that came up a little bit during our first 4 weeks is this thing on karma. Right? People always ask, what's karma? I heard about this word. Tell me what this karma is. Now, as you know, every week I've been creating these notes, which to a lesser or greater effect I've tried to distribute amongst the attendees, and that's why we have an attendance list there with email addresses. So I can get notes, and indeed the video that is being captured here can also be distributed if you wanted to see that. The notes for this week I've made slightly differently, in the sense that I've made it a Q&A. All right. As if somebody was having a conversation and questions were being asked. Because the Upanishads are almost always written as a two-way conversation between a teacher and a student. Because it is the best way of imparting knowledge across. The first few weeks we just had largely broad text, and sometimes that can be a little difficult to read. The fact that it's written down means that you can revisit paragraphs again and again until it becomes clear. But this week I've just done a shortened note because karma is a relatively easy subject. I've done it as a Q&A. All right. And so if you've had thoughts about karma, I'm sure everybody's heard about it. And I'm sure everybody has an idea about what it's all about. I'll just go through it and then feel free. We have a Q&A session afterwards. We can discuss it in detail. So I have this one person, and so there's this conversation going on, right? So the one person says, now tell me about karma. And the teacher says, okay, what would you like to know? And the person says, is it a story or is it true? All right. Natural question to ask, right? And the teacher says, you guys in the Western world, you always have this right or wrong, true or false. In the East, we have 4 states. Something can be true, untrue. Something can be both true and untrue. And something can be neither true nor untrue. All right? If you have a yes and no, I mean, if you look at the Boolean algebra, you've got a 0 and 1. There's these 4 states. So it's not just is something true or not true. And just to prove it, the karma falls into the 3rd category, right? It is neither true nor is it is both true and it's both untrue. All right? And the guy says, oh, that's so frustrating. You haven't answered my question at all. So says, first of all, we must provide some meaning, some context to the words. First of all, karma in Sanskrit means action. So you aren't asking me about action. What you're asking me is about the doctrine of karma, the actual philosophy around karma, right? The philosophy of action is called the doctrine of karma. And this is merely, it says that for every action there is a consequence. Action has a result, that result is a consequence of the action. Seems simple enough. That's what we do every day. We perform an action in order to provide a result. That result is a consequence of the action. When that result or the consequence is beneficial, right, then we call it punya. And when it is non-beneficial, we call it papa. So every action can have a consequence. That consequence can be beneficial or non-beneficial. Notice I'm not saying good or bad, right? Because good or bad is an opinion about the person making that judgment call. Is this action beneficial? Who is it beneficial for? You. And the Upanishads and in the Bhagavad Gita actually says the definition of beneficial is whether it takes you further down your spiritual path or against it. That's what beneficial really means, right? So that's what it means here. So, okay, I understand consequence, doctrine of karma, action leads to result, but is it true? The person keeps on asking. And then you have to say, who is asking? This is why it can be both true and untrue. If you're asking from the perspective of a separate self in this world of objects, you consider yourself to be an individual in this world of objects, and that you have a life, you are born, you have a life and you will die, then karma is true. All right. If you're asking from the perspective, there's only one underlying reality, that's Brahman, and I'm a manifestation of Brahman, then karma is not true. All right. So since we want to understand what the doctrine of karma is, let's take the first perspective. Let's say, all right, I believe that I'm this individual. It's the easiest thing to believe. It's something that I've believed all my life until you came along, Ram. So I'm this separate individual sitting here in a world of objects, and so tell me what this karma is all about. So first of all, it says, when you are a separate self, and you are performing these actions, you consider yourself to be the doer. When you are a separate self, the I in that separate self is the ego inside your mind. And the ego is the one who considers themselves to be the doer. So I'm speaking, I'm thinking, I'm running, I'm walking, I'm eating, I'm drinking, right? The I, in this case, is the ego, is the doer. Since the doer performs the action, the doer is also the beneficiary of all the result. Whoever does is the one that the consequences go up to. Right? Very simple. If you are the owner of the action, you are the owner of the result also. Does that seem clear? All right. So all our lives we perform actions, and these have a consequence. And this consequence in Sanskrit is called agami karma. All right. And this consequence in Sanskrit is also called karma phalam. Any consequence is called karma phalam. Phalam means the fruit of. So the fruit of your actions, if you like. And the fruit of the actions that we perform during this lifetime is called agami. I can't give you an English word for it. I have to stick to Sanskrit because there is no English word for it. Right? It's agami karma. And these are the consequences that you are gathering as you perform your actions. Everything is an action. You take a breath, it's an action. You take a step, it's an action. You open your eyes, it's an action. You plonk somebody on the head, that's an action. You know, everything is an action. Everything has a consequence. Right? And those consequences are accumulated as agami karma. This accumulation, or the fruits of your action, need to fructify. Right? They need to become exhausted. Right? This exhaustion of the consequence can either be immediate or it can be over time. Right? So you hit your hand against the wall, right? It's an action, right? It hurts. Immediate consequence. It hurts a week later. That's something that's still happening way down the road. You've broken your bones and you get arthritis 20 years later, all right? So it can either be, the result can be immediate or it can be in time. So we're accumulating all of this agami karma as we go along and perform our actions. And then suddenly you die. Remember, we're the separate self here. So you die. And the moment of your death, you've not exhausted all of your agami karma. Right? Because there were parts of it that were being held off to be experienced or exercised later, to be exhausted later. You did the immediate bits, but not the later bits. So suddenly you die. This agami karma gets accumulated into your particular karma bank. And when it's accumulated in storage, it's called sanchita karma. And the universe stores it for you. And this is where your unspent agami karma from this life gets banked. Right? Now, there's lots of deposits in your sanchita account from previous lives where you've die, the agami karma goes into the sanchita. Remember, this consequence has these two properties, this punya papa, the beneficial and the non-beneficial. So if you like, this account is both a positive accumulation of the beneficial and accumulation of the non-beneficial. The punya and papa are both being accumulated as sanchita karma. All right? Is everybody with me so far? This sanchita karma grows to such an extent that it needs to express itself. All right? And effectively, what happens, just like a seed is provided with water through which it then bulges and is forced into germination, the sanchita karma and a portion of the sanchita karma is extracted, if you like, withdrawal And this contains both punya and papa. And this withdrawal is called prarabdha. This is the third and final word, I promise. So we had agami karma is the karmic results from the current life. It gets accumulated into a store that's called sanchita karma, then from which there's a withdrawal called prarabdha karma. Prarabdha karma is the reason for which you are born. Because in a world where you believe yourself to be a separate being, in this world of separate beings, you have to ask and get an answer to the question, why me? Why was I born this way? Why wasn't I born taller or prettier or to parents that had more money? All right? Or in another language, in another country, in a warmer place. You have to ask all of the parameters for you to be. You have to say, who chose them? All right? And the first question would be, well, God chose them. And God has a sense of humor because he chooses some people to be really very dull and other people to be really bright. It's a partial God. That doesn't sound like a God to me. Vedanta says that no, God does not choose why you are the way you are. Who chooses is you. Because you are the source of that prarabdha karma. All right. And that withdrawal has been made for you to come into being exactly in the way necessary to exhaust the prarabdha karma that has been withdrawn. That's what makes you who you are. In order to be able to exhaust the prarabdha karma. That determines who you are, what your environment is, what your looks are, what your brightness is, everything. And the moment of birth is said that the prarabdha karma is like an arrow that's left the bow at the moment of birth. While it flies with the momentum of prarabdha karma, the body lives. When that momentum is exhausted, you have consumed your prarabdha karma, the body dies. Okay? Any questions so far?
There is a poem from Khalil Gibran which talks about the arrow, and I'm sure you're probably familiar.
It does, yeah.
Children.
Yeah. It's a very good way of saying it. It leaves the bow, which means that you cannot affect it at the moment of birth. It's in flight. Now people say, oh, I can affect my karma. I can put on nice gemstones. I can go and do a prayer and things like this. Absolutely true. All right. The egg is on its way to the floor. You have time to put a cushion underneath to affect what the egg may or may not do when it hits the floor. But you cannot stop the egg falling. Right? You can do various things, and certainly a lot of rituals are designed to reduce the effect of the papa karma that's part of your life, if you want it reduced. Right? There's very many rituals, there's many things that you can do, and that's what prayer is. Because throughout your life, what will happen to you is largely predetermined. So this guy in the question says, hang on a minute, surely we've got willpower, none of this predestiny for me. I know exactly where I'm going, and when I leave this room, nobody but me is going to decide what to do. Right? That's absolutely true. We have willpower. The way to explain it is like you are this giant locomotive, incredible power, right? Able to go forwards and backwards at enormous speeds, to be able to draw any number of carriages, to go wherever the tracks take you, right? According to your will, but you can only go where there's tracks. That's predestiny. All right. So you are working within a limited, finite set of environments. All right. You're not very good at Chinese, so you don't live in China. All right. You don't have wings, so you don't fly. All right. So you have a certain number of constraints within which you live. Those are your tracks. But within those tracks, you can do anything you like. Actions, karma. But anything you do has consequences. All of your free will are karmic actions in the present day now, so their consequences are agami karma, and they will get accumulated. And you will be the beneficiary of those consequences. All right. So the main events in our lives, including children, including partners, are largely predetermined. If the prarabdha karma that you withdrew on birth requires you to have a partner, then you will have a partner. Otherwise, you'll be single. And remember, it is not just your prarabdha karma. Everybody that you are connected with are also executing their prarabdha karma. So it's intertwined. Just as you have an experience of a child, the child has the experience of the parent. Because that is their prarabdha. Okay?
Can I ask, you said that the arrow flies and when it drops, you've exhausted your prarabdha karma and you die.
Yes.
But you've built up more, haven't you?
You've built up more.
So
You've built up agami, yeah, which goes into sanchita, and then there's a withdrawal in prarabdha. That's why the cycle of life and death, birth and death, right, is an infinite cycle.
we were talking about this earlier. Is only individual then?
Yeah. Can you, so by, doing all the right things in this lifetime, and then you come back, but you're still here, but you pick up another positive. It's not going to be
So what you do by doing all the right things, let's say beneficial, non-beneficial, beneficial things for you and others around you, for the world, you're doing all the beneficial things, your percentage of punya is higher than your papa. That was the non-beneficial. So effectively, the mix that goes into sanchita starts to become more and more positive rather than negative. And therefore, withdrawal will have more positive than negative. So the lives that you have will have more positive elements in it than negative elements in it. So what you do by doing good acts is effectively drive the way that you will come back into the next life. Right.
But this only works if you are an individual.
This only works if you are an individual, because you have to explain what makes me the individual that I am. Because that's the effect. And Vedanta says there's always a cause. So it has to give you the cause of why you are currently here as the effect in this particular way, why you're not different than you are. All right? Why is that set of circumstances chosen in that particular way? So this only, as I said, works if you think yourself an individual. And this is where, it gets less depressing. Because if you think that I'm in this constant birth and death cycle, and I have to do better and better, I have to do more beneficial actions, then my life will get better. All right? So perhaps I will come back as a footballer's wife if I do a lot of really beneficial things. So it gets better and better. And so as you see people around you who are almost in exactly the same environment when they were born, they have done better. All right? They have, at least in your mind, a better life. That is the prarabdha element, because our lives are said to be determined by three things, all right? Desha, which is location, kala, time, and three is prarabdha. So your location, your environment, the fact that there's time involved, time will play on every separate entity that's alive, whether it's an individual, a fruit fly that lives for 2 days, or a rock that lives for billions of years. All right. These three things, location, time, prarabdha, determines the way that we live our lives. Now, there is a way out. All right. Thank goodness there's a way out. And the way out is to no longer think yourself as the individual. If you're no longer the individual I, the ego inside the head, but you are a manifestation of a single underlying reality. So the I now is a higher self, is the greater I, not the little I. Right? Then that greater self looks upon this body and mind as mere objects. It's body and mind that perform the actions. It's the body and mind that owns the consequences. Not me as the higher self. So the actions carry on going, because you simply cannot live without performing actions. But the owner is no longer there, because you have identified yourself with the higher self, rather than the non-doer, rather than the doer, the lower self, the ego. And so while this accumulates, and then the body falls, you are not the body. You've come to that realization. This is what most people would call enlightenment. Right. If you've come to that realization during your lifetime, what's called Jivan Mukti, during your lifetime, then at the point that the body goes away, you are no longer susceptible to this birth-death cycle, because you're no longer the owner of the Sanchita karma from which a withdrawal would be made. All right. It's like this bag of fruit that's going there, it'll just slowly rot and just dissolve away in the universe. It's got no one to claim them. Right? This is the only way out of the birth-death cycle. Now, you could say, well, if karmic results dissolve the moment that you're enlightened, then I shouldn't become enlightened during lifetime, because then the prarabdha karma, this arrow that was flying away, if that suddenly gets dissolved, then poof, I'll just die. So the moment of enlightenment I see, the next thing is that I won't be able to take another breath. But the prarabdha karma, the arrow has already left. Right? It's going to carry on going. When you consider it, all the great sages, they could not determine their lives. Right? Ramakrishna had cancer. Right? Christ was crucified. They had to go through their lives because that was their prarabdha. They no longer shared identity, ownership of the agami karma that was accumulated during that lifetime. So they have gone beyond that, beyond the birth-death cycle. But they're still subject to the prarabdha karma in this current life. So the difference between an enlightened one, a jnani, a knowledgeable one, one who knows, and one who does not know, the ignorant one, is that they live in exactly the same world. The knowing one knows that the doer is not them. They are the eternal witness of the doer, of the mind and body, while the ignorant one treats the mind and the body as I. In a future week, we'll try and get to understand why we think that way. Why we spent our entire lives thinking that this lower I is the real I, rather than anything else. Okay? 11:30. Question time. Oh, my mind has melted. How can you possibly answer questions now when he said at least 5 Sanskrit words and we thought we weren't going to have any? And it's all highly confusing. So any questions?
No, just a quick one.
Yes.
So samskaras, where does the idea of samskaras fit with this? So these are patterns which we have brought over from previous existence.
Yes. So there's 2 words that are very similar. I mean, samskaras tend to be more of a Buddhist word. And there's patterns that we've brought over. And the patterns that we've brought over, when you think about it really hard. These are memories, emotions, energy that we have within us, right? Our experiences, these are therefore non-physical, all right? Non-physical things within our body lives within the subtle body, all right? It's not the physical gross body, it's the subtle body. And we know that there's a subtle body because we know that we have emotions, and we know that emotions are non-tangible. So the subtle body houses all the aspects of us that are intangible to our 5 senses. That's why it's called the subtle body. Because the subtle body is not physical, it is not subject to death. Right? Therefore, it lives when the body itself goes. And it transfers to another body as what is known as the transmigrating soul. And by doing so, it takes its energy with it to a greater or lesser degree to remembered or not remembered in the next life.
So this is another level before full enlightenment? Or?
This is another level before full enlightenment, because you are now, you may have said, okay, I'm not the physical body, but you're still at the stage of, I'm this subtle body, I'm the mind, I'm the ego, my memories, my thoughts, that is definitely me. But the reason, as we said in an earlier week, that those cannot be you, is because you must pre-exist in order to have a memory. All right? And the very fact that you know that you have a thought, you must be the knower of the thought. The thought is known by the process of knowing. The knower and the known cannot be the same thing. I have a thought, I say. I'm the owner of a thought. The owner and that which is owned cannot be the same. If I say I have a car, I'm definitely not a car. I'm the owner of the car. Therefore, if I am aware of something that is different to me, then I cannot be that. So I cannot be my thought. I cannot be my emotion. Besides which, if I wasn't different, I wouldn't be able to detect the difference. Let me give you an example. Say I was traveling along the motorway at exactly 70 miles an hour. Doesn't happen very often, but exactly 70 miles an hour. And I look over my shoulder and there's somebody next lane to me at the same speed drinking a cup of coffee. So what do I see in that person? I see a person drinking a cup of coffee, right? Which is not the entire truth. The entire truth is this is a person drinking a cup of coffee at 70 miles an hour. But I can't see the 70 miles an hour because I'm traveling at 70 miles an hour. If I want to see the real truth, I have to be stationary on the hard shoulder. That is the only way I'll be able to see both the 70 miles an hour and the drinking of the coffee. Right. So, if I am in the mind and there is sadness, if I am the sadness, we're both traveling at 70 miles an hour, I would not be able to detect the sadness. Right. And when the sadness goes up, becomes happy, I must be at some constant, otherwise I would not be able to detect the happiness. I would not be able to detect that change. If I went with my mind, and my mind was low when I was sad, and my mind was high, and that was me, then I would go with the high. I would not detect the highness. But the thing is that I know when I'm sad. I know when I'm happy. I'm the knower of the sadness. I am not the sadness. I cannot be. Yeah, it's very easy. But we get constantly stuck in this thing, the I. We do it not only with our mind. We say, "Oh, I'm the father. I'm this great football player." We do it to roles, right? We do it to our abilities. We do it to our looks. We do it with our partners, with our relationships, with things that we own. We relate to it. There's lots of these eyes. And as we said earlier, there's multiple eyes within the body. All right? You would say, I'm fat. Well, the body's fat, but you're thinking the I am fat is a thought in the mind. So you have a I am fat thought, and I am fat body, but the thought itself is not fat, but the body is. So which I is the real I? Am I the I who's fat? Or am I the one that thinks that I'm fat through a thought, right? These are multiple eyes. There can't be multiple eyes because there's only one of me. So either I must be all of these eyes, or I must be none of these eyes. Vedanta just goes through it logically, one step at a time, trying to explain. The moment that you can say that I have a powerful God, let me pray to that God and they can cure my current condition, then you have separated yourself from God, right? And as we said before, by that very process, you have denuded God of his power because you've made an infinite God into a finite God, right? And you've actually changed God from all good to partial good because he may cure you but care not to cure somebody else, right? And a partial God does not make sense of what God should be. So the moment that you consider yourself to be a separate self from God, these dualistic religions, they all fall down. Because you can ask the question, where is God? And they say, up there. I mean, God is supposed to be all-pervading, right? If God is formless, what up there means that there's an address, and at an address there must be a form of God. But this God is supposed to be formless. All right. So all of these questions were studied in detail, and it came down to there can only be this one underlying reality. And we can go through the logic of why it is so for an individual, why is it for all the objects in the world, and why is it for the giver. These are the three fundamental things that Vedanta tries to prove. That these three things are unbelievable, yet plausible, logical when you come to study them, when you come to know them. Remember, so Shravana is the process by which you hear unconditionally, without opinion. Manana is when you eliminate all the doubts and questions of it, so you turn knowledge gained through Shravana into conviction. Right? And then Nitidhyasana is where you live that conviction to such an extent that it becomes your natural self, eradicating the unconscious responses you normally give to actions that befall you. Because when we normally act, when we normally react to things, we don't do it with a thinking, conscious mind. It comes from a reaction, comes much deeper, all right? So even if you know all of this stuff very well, in your daily lives, when it comes to deal with people and situations, right, you will go from a much deeper, which you haven't yet converted. And that's what Nitidhyasana, the third stage, is all about. And you do that by getting it much deeper into your subconscious, right? Getting this knowledge through from the conscious to the subconscious. the 3-stage, that is also defined. I mean, the entire process is just written down. Every single question you've ever had, why am I here? Where am I going? What is it for? Right? The answers are clearly written down if somebody just cares to read them. That's what I find amazing about it. You know, there hasn't been a question that hasn't been answered yet to my way of thinking. So it's absolutely great. Right. Any other questions before we depart?
Can I ask you about the concept of, I wonder if you could elaborate on it.
Yes, I mean, it's a very good question, is that if you believe in this one underlying reality, then why do you have 30,000 gods in Hinduism, right? It's a perfectly good question. And that these 30,000 gods in Hinduism are technically demigods, halfway, right? And the reason is that if you see every aspect in your world, say, for instance, rain, all right? So you know that as an early farmer, rain is absolutely vital to you, all right? And so rain needs to fall on your field. And so you can consider that there's a micro and a macro level. So the fact that rain falls on your field is at the micro level. At the macro level, there must be rain that's falling in fields all over the planet. In fact, if there's other planets like ours in the universe, then there must be rain that's falling all over the universe, all right? So if you think about rain, and then you go from the micro to the macro level, you try to think of the energy that controls rain at the top level. I mean, if you really want to pray, you don't want to pray for the God who's raining on your field. You want to pray for the God who's raining everywhere, right? So you go to the department marked rain, all right? And you knock on that door and say, God, can you please put a little bit of rain on this little field over there? So every single demigod is effectively the, if you like, personification of the macro element of any energy and force that is around you. So if you have wisdom, wealth, fire, these are the simple ones, but it goes down to individual levels, all right? Then the accumulated total of that must also exist in the macro as it does in the micro. And what this demigod is a focus for you to be able to exert a prayer to the one that controls all of that, all right? It's nothing to do with Ishvara, actually, because when you perform an action, we said this in one of the earlier talks, there are 4 consequences. Normally, when we perform an action, the consequence we want is the one we expect. All right? So the expected result. But there's 3 others. There's better than expected, worse than expected, and opposite to expectation. Every action has got these 4 results. All right? We initiate the action. The result is entirely dependent on things outside us. All right? That I drop the egg, right? I don't drop it. I let go, right? The dropping of the egg is done by gravity, for which I play no part. Yet I say, I dropped the egg, all right? Then the egg smashed, all right? And the egg smashed or not is nothing to do with me. It's the way that the egg was generated. In fact, I didn't even let go of the egg. My fingers let go of the egg. I instructed my fingers to let go, yet I said, I let go of the egg, all right? And it goes back and back and back, and you say, well, the muscles actually let go of the fingers didn't let go. And you go back and back and into the I thought. That's why we go back to the I thought and we say, I did it, because we can't seem to find another person above that. That's why we have the I thought. So when we make a prayer, what we pray for is that the consequence of the action I'm about to perform should be ideally what I expect, or if I'm really lucky, better than expectation. Prayers are always to make sure that the world's forces and energies combine in such a way that the outcome is better than expectation. And who am I going to ask for that? It has to be all of the people in charge of these various departments. The person in charge of gravity, or the person in charge of the solidity of the eggshell. I have to go to all of these departmental heads and say, can you please make sure that this works out the way that I want it to do? And this gives you the focus. When you consider yourself to be a separate, insignificant self, surrounded by a world of objects with powers, then you want those powers to combine together to bring a beneficial result for you. That's why we pray. And that's why we pray to a separate God that we've made up, who is the owner, the departmental head, right? Ishvara is like the Prime Minister. And all these demigods are the different departments, each in charge of their own little section that I can go to direct rather than going to the PM.
Well, maybe there is some parallel in Christianity with the saints.
Yep, there is. Yeah, there are saints, for travel and for health and things like this. Yeah, and these are sort of departmental heads because 99.99999% of the population don't believe that they are a one underlying reality. So the Vedas have provided a mechanism. It's a universal manual for humanity. So the vast majority of it is designed to appeal to the people who haven't yet got to that enlightened state. Therefore, it must give a manual for life on how to cope with life as it comes to you.